Okay, we're going to start talking about dividing monomials. So we did addition, subtract, now we're going to talk about division. First thing I want to talk about is called the complex conjugate. We've kind of dealt with this before. We did something in the warm-up. So a complex conjugate, A plus BI and A minus BI are what are called complex conjugates. The reason why they're complex conjugates is because when you multiply them, you get a real number. Okay, so 4 plus 3i, well, the complex conjugate would be 4 minus 3i. Negative 2 plus I would be negative 2 minus I. So the only thing that changes is the sign in between. Okay, negative 9 minus 2i, negative 9 plus 2i. I have positive I, it's going to be minus I. Because when I multiply this and this, these two together, I end up getting negative 1. Okay, so we're going to talk about dividing complex numbers. Now, back in Algebra 1, you learned at some point that the square root cannot be in the denominator. So I cannot be in the denominator because it's equal to the square root of negative 1. Okay, so just trying to figure out, all right. So to divide out the denominator, to divide when the denominator is a monomial, one term, no adding or subtracting, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to multiply the numerator and denominator by I, because that will get rid of the I in the denominator. Then you're going to change all of your I squareds, if you have them, to negative 1. Combine like terms in your numerator and denominator, and divide out their all terms out by the greatest common factor. Okay. So this first one right here, I want to get rid of the I in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply this by I over I. So this is going to be 10I over 2I squared. Okay. So that's going to be 10I over 2 times negative 1. That's going to be 10I over negative 2. Okay. And I look at this right here. What is the greatest common factor of 10 and negative 2? It's going to be 2. So I can divide both of these by 2. But actually, we don't have to worry about that. This I can simplify. I can divide both of these out, and so I end up with negative 5i as my answer. For the next one, so I have 4 over negative 9i. I'm going to multiply this by I over I. I multiply across. I have 4i over negative I squared. That is 4i over negative 9. I'm going to replace my I squared with negative 1. That's 4i over 9. There's no greatest common factor for 4 and 9, so my answer is going to be 4i over 9, and that's my final answer. These ones right here, they get a little bit more dicey. For this, the procedure doesn't change though. I want to get rid of this I in the denominator because you can't have an I in the denominator. So I multiply by I over I. So that's going to be 28i minus 8i squared. So one of the biggest things you need to do is you need to make sure you distribute. I should have skipped that. All over 4i squared. It's going to be 28i minus 8. I'm going to replace my I squared with negative 1 over 4 times negative 1. I multiply this out, 28i plus 8 over negative 4. Now I look at all three of my terms. I look at my 28, my 8, and my 4. You need to find the greatest common factor. So you're going to put GCD in the Desmos graphing calculator. You're going to put 28, 8, and 4. I'll show you. So if you don't know the greatest common factor, this is just for people that don't know how to find the greatest common factor. So what you're going to do is you go to the Desmos graphing calculator, you go to functions, and you go to GCD, okay? And there you're going to put 28, 8, and 4. And it gives you that 4 is your greatest common factor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide all of my terms by 4. So 28 divided by 4 is 7. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 4 divided by 4 is -1. Okay? And then what I do is I just divide by that negative. So it's going to be -7i minus 2. So I divide by both parts by the -1. And that's my final answer. Should have left a little bit more space, so I apologize for that. All right. So the next one, do the same thing. I multiply by I over I. I make sure I do distributive property. It's going to be -8i minus 2i squared over 6i squared. It's going to be -8i minus 2 times -1 over 6 times -1. -8i plus 2 over -6. Okay, now I find my greatest common factor, so I'm going to do G, C, D, and I'm going to do 8, 2, and 6. And the answer is going to be 2, so I'm going to divide all of these by 2. So -8 divided by 2 is -4i. -2 divided by 2 is 1. And 6 divided by 2 is -3. And there's your final answer.